So just recently, a few months ago, that the honeybee was declared the most important creature on the planet.
I think everybody knows that 1/3 of every bite of food that you take is produced by bees. And without bees, we're all gonna be eating grass.
It's like an ancient art that's passed down from beekeeper to beekeeper, which is really the magic of it.
They're not like something you can train and it's a pet. You manage them the best you can.
Honeybees touches everybody's life in a different way, and you can never get bored. There's just so many different aspects of beekeeping that can keep you busy.
It's very peaceful. It's a peaceful existence, just working alone in a bee yard.
So it takes 12 bees' lifetime to make a teaspoon of honey. And so then if you extrapolate on that, that means it takes almost 1,200 bees to make 1 pound of honey. And that same 1 pound of honey, they had to go visit 2 million flowers to have enough nectar to make that 1 pound. And to make the flights to those 2 million flowers took approximately 56,000 flight miles, which is twice around the equator of the Earth.
The honey is produced through the process of collecting nectar. The bees go to all the different plants in the area. And on a nice day, you'll see that there's usually a lot of yellow pollen coming in here in February.
And when it comes to flowers, especially in suburbia, because it does take 2 million flowers to make a pound, bees are also going to go to what is most plentiful. And if you went outside of your house and looked around right now, the plant that you would see the most is trees.
They will collect pollen and bundle it together with a little of their saliva and pack it onto their back legs. Part of the back leg has a little bit of a divot, and they create this little basket that holds the pollen.
Honeybees are very, very good pollinators. One bee goes out and she'll find a tree that's in bloom. She'll come back, she'll do a waggle dance, and she'll tell the 10 bees that are around her.
They will leave their hive and they'll say, okay, there's a great nectar source about 45 degrees from the entrance to the hive. And they'll see how far away that nectar source is. And once they make the waggle in that direction, the other bee knows that, hey, it's 30 degrees out from the hive.
Before you know it, the whole hive is flying over there getting pollen or nectar from that tree.
Those bees that are flying around are like a cell in your body. They don't exist by themselves. One colony is headed by a queen.
She's an egg-laying machine. She chooses to lay workers or drones, and that's all based on if she fertilizes the egg. She will either fertilize an egg or not fertilize an egg. Unfertilized eggs become males, and the fertilized eggs become female.
And that queen mates with multiple drones.
The drone, of course, is the male, and their job is basically mating and death. If they don't get to mate, they'll either leave and eventually die of old age, or if it's the fall time, they'll actually get evicted from the hive.
So within the hive, the bees are in a variety of subfamilies.
The worker is the workhorse of the hive. She's the one who does all the jobs, all the foraging, all the cleaning, all of the taking care of brood. In the height of the summer, she'll live for about 6 weeks, and that's because she will work herself to death.
So each hive needs 60 to 80 pounds of honey that they have to make for themselves before I start putting my boxes on top and getting honey for me. And that's amazing when you think that in its lifetime, each bee will only make 1/12 of 1 teaspoon of honey. So that means every time you sweeten your cup of tea, that was 12 bees' life work to make that taste good.
1/12 of a teaspoon. So with all the people and all of the demand for honey, whether it be cooking and baking or just, in your tea, there's not enough honey produced in the US.
Honeybees are the only bees that produce honey for human consumption. They're very, very unique. They work together as a family, as a colony. They sacrifice for each other. It's really a selfless community that they live in.
The honeybee is the link between the plant and the animal kingdom. So the honeybees pollinate just about all of the flowering plants on the entire planet. So if we just take us out of the picture, they're allowing everything to grow. They're providing food and habitat for wildlife.
They're responsible for 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat and all the different plants that they pollinate.
So if you took honeybees out of the equation, our food supply would be drastically impacted.
So when you think of the scale, you realize the impact that bees are making on the flowers around us. So even if you're not in an agricultural area, it's important to have bees if you want your yard to look nice and the plants continue to grow.
Beekeeping's my passion. I found something that I love. I've always been in business for myself.
I've been interested in bees since 6th grade.
Most kids have chores around the house, vacuuming, cleaning, stuff like that. My chores were everything to do with bees.
But even as a small child, there was something that just made me want to be around bees. So I can't really explain it. Some people call it a calling. Some people will call it a crazy obsession, but it's something I always wanted to do. Once the beekeeping bug bites you, it's hard to let go of that.
I think you can find beekeepers in every walk of life. They can be MDs, they can be scientists, they can be construction workers. My feeling is if you keep bees for 3 years, you're hooked.
That very first day I suited up and the electric fence was on, and I remember I was standing like this, so afraid to touch it, and I just was so fascinated by what I was seeing in the beehive. And once I was hands-on looking over 60,000 stinging insects, I said, yes, this is for me.
In 1997, I had a dream that I was a beekeeper. So I woke up and I thought, okay, let's start with a hive.
There's an instinct in you as a beekeeper. You know this is something you've got to do.
When I started beekeeping, I went in a lot of different areas, didn't know where the journey would take me.
I'm a certified master beekeeper through Eastern Apicultural Society of North America.
I am a Cornell-trained entomologist. I am also a master beekeeper, and I've also been a professional and a commercial beekeeper, as well as a sideliner.
Commercial beekeepers are people that keep bees for a living. There's only about maybe 2,000 commercial beekeepers in the country. That's generally 250 colonies or more would be considered commercial. A sideliner is a person that's, say, between 50 and that 250. And then, of course, a hobbyist is somebody that does it as a hobby, a backyard, enjoys it, makes a few pounds of honey, sells that, but not is in it for a business.
Yeah, I consider myself a sideliner. It's funny, when I got into bees, I didn't do it for the honey, but honey soon became kind of a measure of success, and so that's what I focus on.
The honey is awesome, but once you become a beekeeper, it's not really about the honey. It's really about the bees. They're fascinating. How do they know what they know?
Some people are beekeepers, some people are bee havers.
They have bees, then they don't, because the bees die. Then there's the beekeepers who practice and enjoy the craft. But as they do that, because they tend to the bees, they care, they don't have much of a choice, because when you tend to something and you nurture it and it grows, you have no choice but to grow with it, otherwise you have to stop it.
And it really just kind of boils down to the people who put 100% into the hobby or the career in beekeeping.
I started raising bees so that I'd have honey to sell. And after the first couple of years, I found that I was making 200 pounds of honey.
4 hives that fall, I made 25 pounds of honey. The next year I made 400 pounds. Next year after that, 500. The next year after that, 600, 700 pounds.
I mean, you can't keep making honey every year like that and not sell it.
If you don't know your beekeeper, then you don't know what kind of honey you're getting.
So the beekeepers know where they put their bees, so they can collect the best quality nectar to produce, so for the bees to produce the best quality honey. That's, I think, is the main benefits to have your personal beekeeper.
We're both a honey producer and pollinator. Over the course of the years, we've gotten away from pollination and went more for honey production. We're also a honey packer, so we utilize all the honey we produce in packing for the supermarket.
So how you store honey and how you extract it and how you bottle it is all very important, more important than the locality of the production.
The advantage of buying a local honey is that you get 100% honey.
We want the public to be able to walk our property and learn about the value of pollination and the value that honeybees provide to pollination services in our food chain.
You can sell propolis, which is what the bees collect from the trees. It's a resin, and people like to grind that down, and they use that for different medicinal purposes. The pollen, a lot of people like to take pollen, that for a protein source. The bees themselves, you can sell bees.
Most beekeepers have an inner passion for bees. To me, it puts us one in with nature. It changes every day. Every beehive is different.
Then you enter into the art of beekeeping. You're lighting your smoker, you're smelling the smoke, you begin to go into some different state of consciousness.
There's something calming about being with the bees, which I know sounds weird, because literally when I'm in the bee yard and there's thousands of bees around me, it's calming. And I think maybe it is because they're doing their job.
I love the girls, I really do. They are sweet. If you get the right hive, all Italians, they are just sweet.
The bees respond to you, and you respond to the bees.
When we first got the honeybees, I would look for them. You know, I'd want to say, oh, that's one of our girls, you know, kind of thing. That's how I would feel. They may have come from another place, but to me, that was our bees.
When you open the hive, they get right up on their front feet like that, with their tail end sticking up here, and they're letting go of pheromone. And I'll say, good morning, girls, and they go right down.
It's exciting, right? But who else can say they have like a crazy exciting day where like, you wouldn't believe how the bees were today, and oh, they swarmed on us, and I went and climbed up a 20-foot tree and just caught them and brought them down. Like, there's no other job that you can do that at.
Once you're in it and you're around them enough times, it just becomes a passion with you, and you just want to be able to keep them alive, keep them happy, and keep them healthy, and it's something once you're stung, you're in it, that's it.
It's something that forces you to slow down. It forces you to put your phone down. It forces you to, not be Googling stuff on your iPad. You have to just be there in the moment, and you need to learn from other people. It forces you to just revisit or recognize that, there's more to life than sometimes what's just like on your phone.
Every time you learn one thing about bees, you have 2 more questions. Everybody that you tell that you have bees is going to want to know more. It's a nice feeling to be able to tell people about something that they don't already know.
So they're kind of teachers to us as well. And then their honey is not only delicious and creates sweet things that everybody loves, but there are a lot of things that are good for your health about honey too, as long as you do it in moderation.
Raw local honey has in it lots of pollen. And if kids are sneezing and having trouble with allergies, mom can give them some honey, and it does work miracles.
The other benefit is that honey is antibacterial. And so if you're eating it, it's helping you fight the bacteria in your throat. Honey is also beneficial to put on injuries and cuts because it's antibacterial.
There's nothing like standing over a beehive and pulling out a frame of honey, capped honey. You can just dig into it, and fresh as it can be, and straight from the hive to your mouth, and that's something that always is very satisfying to me.
So the beehive is not just the bees. There's medicine, there's arts and crafts, there's pollinating your garden.
Our job as beekeepers is to keep the bees healthy.
So right now, the national statistic is 30% of the hives are dying every winter.
The biggest problem that the bees have are mites, and they're specific to honey bees. They don't live anywhere else. They live right inside the hive. And they reproduce inside the cell with the baby bee. They're very difficult to control. But if you don't control them, they will take over the whole entire hive.
We brought over from Asia a mite. It's called Varroa destructor, and this mite is not an insect, it's actually an arachnid.
Varroa came onto our honeybees, the European honeybees, in the 1960s, and since that time has spread to every place there is bees around the globe, except for Australia and Newfoundland.
And it's more like a tick on us, and just like ticks on us can transmit disease, these ticks transmit disease to the bees.
Because what the mites are actually eating on is the bee fat body, and the bee fat body is equivalent to the human liver, and that's what they need to make it through the winter. So because that's been depleted by the mites, they're not able to generate the heat that they need to. So it takes less mites to wipe out a hive. So at beekeeping meetings, the joke is we talk more about mites than we do about bees, because it's that important to the success of honeybees.
We check the hives weekly. That's the only way we can keep them alive. If you find that the bees have enough mites in the hive, then you've got to medicate. But if you don't medicate, within 2 weeks that hive is dead. Just like that. You come out here and they're all dead.
Varroa mites is the bane of beekeeping existence.
And then we have the overuse of herbicides, fungicides, pesticides in our environment that if our bees are sick, they cannot overcome the exposure to those chemicals.
A day spray will immediately kill bees right then and there because they're active and around those trees and flowers and they're getting whacked with a pesticide. If the farmer were to say spray certain kinds of pesticides at night, there might be some exposure to bees out in the field, but it's nighttime, so the majority of the bees are inside their colonies, and our losses are just a few bees here and there.
When a pesticide is applied, what is the longer effects of that, and also the ripple effect, meaning that, what's the blow off from those crops? Does it get into the groundwater? What other implications are there? But there's also ways and plenty of pesticides and application methods that don't hurt the bees, so the step backwards could really have a bigger effect on the U.S. economy.
Quite often the honey that you would get in a grocery store is pasteurized. Our honey is not pasteurized. All we do is put it in a centrifuge and take the beeswax out. So you're getting the purest form of honey. Honey is really a honey-like substance in a grocery store if you're getting like a typical grocery store honey. So you really want to know your beekeeper.
In the last 4 years, it became much harder for a beekeeping commercial operation to operate in the United States. Very likely China is producing something that we call fake honey, and that's a problem because they use these high quantities of honey and dump in the United States market in very cheap price, making the price of the honey really low, which make it really hard for commercial beekeepers and beekeepers alike to sustain their operation. So they need to move to other income sources like pollination or other things. It's really hard for a beekeeper to keep their operation today producing only honey, which is very sad. It's very sad.
Murder hornets, otherwise known as the Asian giant hornet, has been in the news recently with some sensational headlines. As a beekeeper, you can see I'm kind of smiling and chuckling a little bit here because it's really the media gone wild. They've run a sensational headline with a little bit of truth and a lot of speculation.
And they've only found a few bees. They haven't found any colonies yet in the US. So as long as that they haven't established, that we should be okay. Essentially, European honeybees don't have any natural defenses, and that's why the Asian giant hornet is so able to destroy the hives.
I really don't think it's a problem. yet. It could be, but the data and the science say that not really a threat to beekeeping in North America just yet.
With the coronavirus, I think it impacts everybody. Less for our industry. We might not sell as much honey to a restaurant that uses our honey, but we are still going to run our bees outside.
Because if we stop, we lose the bees. So I will continue working. I will continue working in the fields, moving my bees, providing pollination services, and producing a crop of honey.
You know, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, I think to myself, all you need to do is replace that with the word climate change.
I think what this pandemic has shown people is that it's a really important time to reset and to rethink how we're living. We saw our gardens and our farms go crazy. We saw people getting outside. So I'm hoping, and I'm being very optimistic that some silver lining has come out of this pandemic, and we are going to get back to nature.
So we really have to think about what we're doing in this world and try to make it a better place, not only for our own health, but for our ecosystem, which is the honeybees are a big part of.
Nature should not be something that we drive to. It's all around us. We are part of nature. We need to support it.
It's very important to the whole environment that we have bees and that we promote bees and that we really do what we can to help them when we can.
We need to somehow figure out how to grow food and have conservation and have them go hand by hand.
I'm like really excited for the younger generation that is interested in beekeeping.
If we raise a generation of children that understand the importance of pollinators in general, not just honeybees, then they become a little bit more in tune to the ecosphere, and that has to be good.
Our goal is to not only teach children, but to teach their parents, and those kids are going home and cross-pollinating with their moms and their dads and their grandparents and their cousins and their aunts and their uncles. And I think they get so worked up and excited about it that the passion that they have translates to action for their parents.
Educate children about how to grow their own food, how bees are integral in the pollination of the food, and have more beekeepers get on board, have more young people become beekeepers.
I think my absolute favorite experience is when I'm teaching my beginner beekeepers and all of a sudden the penny drops and they start to connect the dots and they start to see that the bees and the plants and us are all connected.
What happens, it's so much bigger than just save the bees, it's save us, save the whole world.
Well, we all say save the bees, and you know, without them we couldn't survive. You know, 1 in 3 mouthfuls of food that a human being consumes is the byproduct of a honeybee.
And there's a love for the honeybee itself that is not able to transcend into words, you just have to see.